Hey guys, tonight we step onto ancient sands, where shadows cast by towering monuments play tricks beneath a moonlit sky. Imagine standing barefoot on sun-warmed sand as twilight turns Egypt's desert into a sea of cool silver dunes. The wind whispers secrets from ages past, rustling through palm fronds like ghostly applause. Above you, silhouetted against the dusk, the mighty pyramids loom, massive and silent, defying time itself. There's no Wi-Fi here, no vending machines, and just a heads up, you probably won't survive this if you decide to climb these gigantic triangles without a safety harness. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop your location and the local time in the comments. I love seeing where these bedtime journeys find you. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You crane your neck upward, taking in the unimaginable scale of these ancient tombs. The Great Pyramid of Giza rises sharply, over 450 feet into the Egyptian sky. Constructed with approximately 2.3 million stone blocks each one, so massive that it's mind-boggling how ancient Egyptians managed to stack them with such precision. Some blocks weigh as much as 15 tons, about the same as 3 elephants casually piled on top of one another. And, speaking of precision, the pyramid sides are aligned with cardinal directions, so precisely that modern compasses would blush. But it isn't just the monumental size that captures your imagination. As you walk closer, you realize the stones are fitted together so tightly that even today, thousands of years after construction, you'd be hard-pressed to slip a credit card between them. The original polished limestone casing longs, stripped away for building modern Kara wood, have gleamed brightly in the desert sun, turning the pyramids into shimmering mountains of blinding white. Ancient Egyptian tourists would have needed sunglasses just to enjoy the view if only they'd been invented. You can't help but wonder, how exactly did they pull this off? No cranes, no trucks, no modern machinery, just ropes, ramps, and muscle power. Historians still argue whether they used enormous straight ramps, spiral ramps wrapping around the pyramid, or a combination of both. Recent archaeological digs have even suggested water-filled channels might have been employed to float massive stones closer to their resting places. If true, it means the pyramid builders weren't just ingenious engineers, they were also surprisingly talented at water sports. Beyond engineering prowess, these pyramids served as monumental tombs for the pharaohs, who believed deeply in the afterlife. The pyramid wasn't just a fancy grave, it was an ascension device, an interstellar staircase connecting the earthly realm to the heavens. Pharaoh Khufu, for instance, built the Great Pyramid intending his spirit to rise to the stars and join the sun god Ra on his daily cosmic journey. Inside, his burial chamber sits silently beneath tons of stone, perfectly oriented to celestial alignments to facilitate this divine commute. Your feet crunch softly in the loose sand as you circle the pyramid's base, imagining the ceremonies performed here long ago. Priests chanting solemn hymns, incense swirling toward the heavens, while workers scurried around placing finishing touches. Pharaoh's eternal slumber would have been announced by elaborate rituals to ensure his safe passage to immortality. Ironically, despite all these precautions, Khufu's actual mummy was never found. You can't help but wonder if he outsmarted us all, slipping off unnoticed into the Egyptian night. Moving toward the eastern side, the moonlight reveals remnants of smaller pyramids nearby, the so-called Queen's Pyramids, built to house the souls of royal consorts and family members. These often overlooked mini-pyramids tell quieter stories, but their presence speaks volumes about the Egyptian belief in family unity even after death. You pause, glancing toward the horizon, where the silhouette of the second largest pyramid, the Pyramid of Khafre, dominates the skyline. Built for Khufu's son Khafre, it seems taller at first glance because it's constructed on slightly higher ground, giving it an eternal inferiority complex. Khafre's builders cleverly compensated for this psychological issue by coating the top with smooth limestone casing, some of which survives today, leaving it appearing capped in snow. It's as if Khafre is forever trying to upstage his father-family rivalry cast in stone. As you linger, your eyes catch something glinting in the sand. Kneeling down, you brush away centuries of sand, revealing fragments of pottery perhaps once filled with offerings for the afterlife, left behind by mourners. A small beetle scuttles away, likely unaware it's traversing ground humans have revered for millennia. One odd little fact tickles your curiosity. The ancient Egyptians once believed that a deceased person's heart was weighed in the afterlife against a feather, determining their worthiness to enter eternal paradise. Heart too heavy? Sorry, no afterlife party invitation for you. So, Egyptians often included a spell in their tomb inscriptions politely requesting the heart to stay truthful and not snitch about life's misdemeanors. Who knew honesty mattered so much even after death? Standing here, with the vast emptiness of the desert stretching endlessly around you, you sense the deep silence punctuated only by the occasional whisper of the wind. The pyramids, massive yet delicate in their precision, seem both timeless and fragile, an odd paradox that mirrors life itself. It's a humbling experience, reminding you of humanity's persistent quest for immortality, whether through monumental architecture, elaborate rituals, or simply through stories passed down generations. But these pyramids aren't just historical relics. Even today, they inspire awe, curiosity, and a touch of existential dread. After all, they've watched civilizations rise and crumble, yet here they stand, silent and eternal, indifferent observers to humanity's fleeting existence. You take a deep breath, feeling the desert air cool your lungs, and glance one last time at these awe-inspiring monuments. They remain stubbornly enigmatic, hiding their true secrets in plain sight, silently challenging humanity to keep asking questions, keep seeking answers, and keep dreaming of immortality. With one final glance, you begin walking toward another ancient Mysteria monumental guardian watching over these tombs, one whose missing nose has puzzled visitors for centuries. But that's a story we'll unravel next. As you step away from the pyramids, your eyes adjust slowly to the shadows cast by a massive figure resting solemnly in the sands. Looming ahead, mysterious and eternal, is the enigmatic guardian of Gizah's Great Sphinx. If the pyramids are Egypt's eternal kings, the Sphinx is their vigilant sentinel, perpetually on watch, yet forever bound in silence. Moonlight gently highlights its weathered face, softening the harsh erosion lines carved by millennia of wind and sand. The scene feels like stepping into a dream filled with ancient whispers and riddles left unanswered. The closer you move, the more its immense scale becomes evident. Carved from a single outcrop of limestone, the Great Sphinx stretches an incredible 240 feet from its colossal paws to its tail. Imagine a football field minus the end zones, and you'll start to grasp just how enormous it truly is. Its head rises more than 60 feet above the desert floor, roughly the height of a 6-story building. And yet, despite its monumental size, there's something deeply personal about the Sphinx's enigmatic gaziers, if it knows exactly who you are and what secrets you carry. Scholars agree that the Great Sphinx was crafted during the reign of Pharaoh Khafre, around 2532 BC, placing its origins directly within the era of pyramid building splendor. Its face is believed to depict Khafre himself, giving him a monumental presence beyond death. But here's where history gets deliciously murky. Historians still argue whether the Sphinx originally featured Khafre's visage or if it was recarved from a pre-existing structure. Some fringe theories even suggest that the Sphinx predates Khafre by thousands of years, linking it to a lost civilization, a tempting narrative for conspiracy theorists, ancient aliens enthusiasts, and your eccentric uncle at Thanksgiving dinners. One thing scholars agree on: the Great Sphinx symbolizes royal authority fused with divine protection. With the body of a lion and the head of a pharaoh, it embodies raw power and intellectual majesty combined into one mythical creature. The ancient Egyptians believed that the Sphinx watched over the sacred burial grounds, ensuring no harm befell the tombs or their occupants' afterlives. With the pyramid standing behind, the guardian's eyes stare unblinkingly eastward, toward the rising sun, symbolizing rebirth and eternal vigilance. Speaking of eyes, they were once vividly painted, perhaps with striking kohl outlines and vibrant hues, allowing the Sphinx to stare with lifelike intensity. Today, only hollow sockets remain, but you can imagine the chilling effect its original gaze would have on intruders, maybe just ancient tourists casually walking by. The Egyptians didn't build the Sphinx simply as decoration. It served as a spiritual guardian, a boundary marker between the realm of the living and the kingdom of the dead. Anyone entering its shadow had better have pure intentions, or at least bring a suitable offering. You wander closer, approaching the enormous paws stretched out in front. Between them lies the famous Dream Stele, a granite tablet erected by Pharaoh Thutmose IV around 1400 BC. According to legend, Thutmose, then a prince, fell asleep in the shadow of the Sphinx after a strenuous hunting trip, probably not recommended napping territory by modern safety standards, and dreamt that the great statue spoke directly to him, promising the throne if he would clear away the sands engulfing its body. Upon awakening, Thutmose diligently fulfilled his part of the deal, freeing the Sphinx from the encroaching sands. And sure enough, he soon ascended to Egypt's throne. Moral of the story: always pay attention to your weird dreams. They might offer you a kingdom or at least a promotion at work. Over the centuries, desert sands repeatedly buried and uncovered the Sphinx, turning its existence into a cyclical mystery. Imagine the surprise of ancient Egyptians rediscovering their monument every few generations, like an enormous, ancient game of hide and seek. Even Napoleon's troops found the Sphinx buried to its neck, prompting vivid imaginations of a buried treasure or a secret chamber beneath. Unfortunately, all they unearthed was more sand-disappointing treasure hunters everywhere. But that hasn't stopped modern archaeologists from using ground-penetrating radar, still hoping to discover hidden passages or chambers beneath the enigmatic guardian. So far, the Sphinx continues to guard its secrets jealously. Perhaps the most iconic and puzzling aspect of the Sphinx is its famously missing nose. If you've ever heard the urban legend that Napoleon's soldiers used it for target practice, you're not alone, but historians agree this is likely just a tall tale. In reality, evidence suggests the nose was deliberately removed sometime during the medieval period, possibly due to religious iconoclasm, as destroying facial features was thought to neutralize spiritual power. Poor Sphinx losing your nose to superstition must have really stung, especially since Egyptians believed damaging an image could harm its soul. Hopefully, somewhere in the afterlife, the Sphinx received a sympathetic nose reconstruction. Now, as you stand beneath the Sphinx's chin, you notice deep grooves and erosion caused by thousands of years of wind and sand. But here's a quirky fringe theory. Some researchers argue the erosion patterns suggest prolonged water exposure, indicating the Sphinx might predate even Egypt's dynastic period, possibly constructed during a wetter climate. Mainstream Egyptologists shake their heads at this watery hypothesis, but the debate persists. It's another reminder of how little we truly know about this magnificent relic, and how delightfully open-ended history can be. As your eyes trace its massive frame, the quiet of the desert envelops you again, broken only by distant rustles of night creatures, probably desert foxes or jerboas darting across the sands. You feel dwarfed by the enormity of history and humbled by the weight of unanswered questions. Who built this giant? What was their exact intention? Did ancient priests really commune with its spirit? Every question opens another, a puzzle box with endless compartments. It's this perpetual mystery that keeps millions of visitors coming back, century after century, each hoping to uncover a piece of truth. Standing here, bathed in pale moonlight, you sense the timeless patience of the Sphinx, a creature comfortable in eternal silence, waiting endlessly for humanity to unravel its riddles. Tonight, you join countless souls who've stood before it, equally captivated and baffled, awed by its grandeur, mystified by its secrets, and amused by its noseless indignity. With a final nod to the vigilant guardian, you turn slowly away, ready to move onward in our Egyptian journey this time, exploring how such staggering monuments were constructed in the first place. But remember the Sphinx's gaze. It'll stay with you, silently reminding you that some questions are perhaps better left unanswered. You shuffle forward now, sand curling gently around your ankles, wondering the same thing countless others have asked for millennia. How on earth did they build this stuff? No cranes, no backhoes, no Bluetooth leveling tools, just raw manpower, pure geometry, and an uncanny mastery of stone. Tonight, you're going to follow the path of ancient builders, rubbing sore shoulders in sympathy and muttering about union breaks that probably never came. Welcome to the dusty, back-breaking world of ancient Egyptian construction. Imagine this. You're a laborer waking before dawn, the Nile's early mist clinging to the fields as the call of ibises cuts through the haze. Your job today? Haul limestone blocks, each weighing between 2 and 15 tons, up an earthen ramp under the glaring Egyptian sun. Sound appealing? Probably not. But for tens of thousands of workers, some of them skilled artisans, some forced laborers, others conscripts, it was reality. And incredibly, they didn't just endure this, they turned it into a national marvel. Contrary to popular belief, the pyramids weren't built by slaves. Mainstream historians now argue that they were constructed by a workforce of paid laborers, organized into rotating crews. Archaeological digs at Giza have uncovered workers' villages with bakeries, breweries, and even hospitals, suggesting a surprisingly humane infrastructure. You picture these workers gathered around communal fires, roasting fish, and debating whether Pharaoh Khufu's nose really was that big. The organization of labor was precise, almost militaristic. Teams were divided into groups called Zar and File, each assigned specific tasks. Some quarried the stone from local cliffs. Others dragged the blocks on sleds, lubricated by water to reduce frictionatric rediscovered by modern physicists only recently. Still, others laid the stones in mathematically perfect alignment, guided by wooden tools and copper chisels, adjusting by eye and string. And let's not forget the supervisors, their names have even been found etched onto stone blocks, like the Drunkards of Moncourt. Not quite HR-compliant branding, but charmingly honest. Now look again at the Great Pyramid. It's not just a pile of rocks, it's 2.3 million limestone and granite blocks fitted together with astonishing precision. Modern laser measurements show gaps between stones averaging less than half a millimeter. That's tighter than your phone screen protector. How did they pull it off? One theory is the use of copper saws and dolerite pounding stones. Others say abrasives like quartz sand did the trick. Historians still argue whether internal ramps, external causeways, or some lost method involving counterweights and god-level patience was the key. At the base of the pyramid, you'd find wide causeways, used to transport materials from the Nile, which swelled seasonally and brought granite from quarries in Aswan, over 500 miles away. Boats specially designed for massive loads carried these stones downstream. Just picture a traffic jam of barges, each hauling chunks the size of SUVs, captained by men trying to out-yell each other while herons fly overhead, unimpressed. There's also the lesser-known story of the mortar. The Egyptians used a gypsum-based compound, more durable than anything in Home Depot, to bind stones. It's so resilient that, in many places, the mortar has outlasted the limestone. That's right, these ancient workers outglued us all. One fringe theory, we promised you one, claims the pyramid stones were cast, not carveda, sort of ancient concrete poured into molds. It's hotly debated, but the concept of lost Egyptian chemistry still intrigues many. You step onto one of the lower courses of the pyramid. Each stone fits snugly, whispering a story of precision and pride. There are tool marks, yes, but also evidence of final polishing, of someone taking that extra time to smooth a surface not seen by the pharaoh, but perhaps seen by Raoul, maybe just appreciated in a moonlit moment like this. It's this blend of labor and reverence that makes the pyramids feel a live-not, cold relics, but built expressions of faith, ambition, and identity. The scale wasn't just logistical, it was spiritual. Egyptians believed in Ma'at, a divine order that governed all things. Building a pyramid wasn't just an engineering feat, it was a cosmic necessity. The angle of the sides, about 51.5 degrees, may align with solar paths or star clusters like Orion's belt. The pyramid was both tomb and timekeeper, heaven-reaching monument and earthbound anchor. Every stone was a prayer, a promise, and possibly a complaint about sore backs. Now consider the unseen. Under the pyramids are corridors, chambers, air shafts whose exact function is still debated. Some believe they served ritual purposes. Others say they were meant for ventilation as escape routes for the pharaoh's soul. The Great Pyramid's king's chamber was built using granite beams weighing up to 80 tons, stacked above each other to deflect weight and prevent collapse. Even today, engineers scratch their heads at how those beams were lifted 150 feet into the air. There's no conclusive answer, just theories, awe, and a bit of envy from every architect alive. As you walk around the monument, you notice restoration crews carefully brushing sand from stone joints. Egypt continues to protect and preserve these feats, though centuries of erosion, vandalism, and environmental stress have taken their toll. The structures have changed, and so has our understanding. Modern archaeologists now use drones, laser scanning, and AI modeling to map microfractures and study shifting foundations. Who knows? Maybe your grandkids will tour a digital pyramid while sipping date shakes in virtual reality. And here comes your second quirky moment of the night. An inscription found near the Giza Plateau details a lost shipment of B40 Rials jars, delayed due to crocodiles in the river. Ancient logistics was a beast. No wonder their supply managers got hieroglyphs on the wall. You take one last look at the structure and wonder not about the pyramid itself, but about the men and women who created it. The builders are long gone, their names mostly lost, but their vision still rises from the desert floor. It's humbling, isn't it, that such fleeting lives could leave behind something so eternal. Their sweat is dry, their bones are dust, but their work still scratches the sky. You brush the sand from your hands, the grit feeling almost sacred now. As you walk away from the pyramid's base, The sound of your footsteps blends with the wind, echoing softly against the stone. Somewhere up there, in that star-shaped geometry of time and purpose, the builders rest. And tomorrow, you'll follow where their afterlives were believed to go through the underworld, past trials, and into the arms of eternity. You wake up under the glow of a midday sun, just as the scent of warm stone and spiced incense rolls through the desert air. The shadows have shifted, and you've wandered farther south. You're still walking through ancient Egypt, but this time, not along the edges of sand and stone. Instead, you're stepping into a place that breathes with its own sacred pulse, Karnak. If the pyramids were built for death, Karnak was built for the living gods. And tonight, you're about to explore the greatest temple complex ever constructed by human hands. This place isn't just large, it's staggeringly, absurdly massive. You pause to look around, half expecting to get lost in a forest of stone. Karnak sprawls over 200 acres, more than 150 football fields of chapels, pylons, courtyards, and sanctuaries. For nearly 2,000 years, it grew like an architectural snowball, with each pharaoh adding new wings, carving new columns, and leaving behind inscriptions so bold. It's like each of them was shouting, "Yes, I was here and I was magnificent." You start at the Avenue of Sphinxes, your feet crunching over smooth sandstone. It once stretched for over a mile, connecting Karnak to the Luxor Temple. Each Sphinxlian's body, ram's headstands in silent formation, guardians of the divine road. As you walk, their eyes seem to follow you, their ancient mouths tight with secrets. You resist the urge to wave. It probably wouldn't help. Then, like stepping into the atrium of a stone cathedral designed by the gods themselves, you pass through the first pylon and enter the great hypostyle hall. And there you stop. You absolutely stop. Towering 134 columns rise like a petrified jungle, their papyrus-shaped capitals fanning open overhead. Each one is as tall as a 6-story building, their shafts covered with hieroglyphs etched deeper than your fingers can reach. These weren't just structural supports, they were cosmic trees, connecting heaven and earth. The scale is so overwhelming it doesn't feel real, more like a set from a fantasy epic you watched with popcorn on your chest. But this was real, is real, and it was all meant to impress one singular presence, Amun-Ra, king of the gods. See, Karnak wasn't just a building, it was a theater of power and piety. It grew around the cult of Amun, who started as a local Theban deity and rose to become the hidden creator god. When the Theban kings of the Middle Kingdom ascended, they brought Amun with them, elevating him, expanding his temples, and channeling Egypt's wealth into the house of their patron. Here's your mainstream historical nugget. The New Kingdom pharaohs Thutmose III, Hatshepsut, Seti I, and Ramses I left their mark on Karnak. Ramses alone added 7 colossal gateways, like someone getting a bonus room for each military campaign. These structures weren't random. They followed a sacred axis aligned with the sun's movements. At dawn during solstice, sunlight would pierce through the temple's core like a divine spotlight. Historians still argue whether this solar alignment was symbolic ritual or practical calendar, but either way, it made for some impressive divine timing. You pass a statue of Hatshepsut, that Hatshepsut female pharaoh who ruled as king. Her obelisks still pierce the sky at Karnak, the tallest once coated in electrum, a gold-silver alloy so bright it could blind at noon. She built, not in the shadows, but with style. If Beyoncé time-traveled back 3,500 years and needed a spiritual twin, this would be the one. The walls speak, too. You run your fingers over battle reliefs, showing pharaohs smiting enemies, kneeling before gods, or leading cattle to sacrifice. And tucked between the grand inscriptions, you find the quirks, graffiti left by priests, tourists, even Roman soldiers. One scratched note reads more like a complaint than prayer. Another depicts a game board carved into the stony reminder that even in divine spaces, boredom finds a way. You pause by the sacred lake, used for ritual purification. Priests would bathe here before performing ceremonies, washing off the mundane to face the eternal. You lean over and see your reflection ripple, distorted like time itself. Somewhere in those ripples are echoes of chant, the flutter of linen robes, the smell of lotus and myrrh. It's easy to forget the sweat behind the splendor. The Karnak you see now is the result of generations of labor. Quarrymen, sculptors, painters, surveyors, all orchestrated by temple scribes working with uncanny precision. Even the paint, now faded, was once so vibrant that travelers claimed the walls shone with fire. Some experimental reconstructions show brilliant reds, blues, and gold's more comic book marvel than dusty museum. And here's your quirky twist. The god Amun's statue, hidden in the holiest inner sanctum, was once carried in a sacred barkia kind of golden boat that priests would lift and parade through the complex during festivals. On feast days, Karnak turned into a liturgical dance floor. Thousands of people gathered, singing, offering bread and beer, and watching as the divine boat moved from sanctuary to sanctuary like a VIP in a processional limo. You imagine some poor priest trying not to trip while everyone's watching. But not all at Karnak was glory and pageantry. Politics seeped in too. During the reign of Akhenaten, the heretic pharaoh who worshipped Aten and tried to erase Amun, this place was abandoned, its god temporarily forgotten. The temple fell quiet, its rituals silenced. But like all good legends, Amun returned, and Karnak boomed again, expanded even more, as if to say, you can't cancel a god that big. You head deeper now, past towering pylons and roofless courts. Each step echoes with sand and centuries. The smell of stone never leaves you, and neither does the sense that you're somewhere between world and sky. And as the sun begins to tilt westward, casting long shadows through colonnades and crumbled sanctuaries, you remember something. This place was never meant to be finished. That's right. Karnak was built to grow forever. Each ruler added their chapter, each stone a sentence in an eternal book. There was no final form, just devotion, ambition, and divine arms reaching skyward. You glance over your shoulder one last time. The columns loom, casting their long silhouettes onto the temple floor. You half expect them to move, and maybe, in some way, they do. Maybe they remember. And maybe, just maybe, when the moon rises and no one's watching, they whisper secrets only gods understand. You're still in Thebes modern-day Luxor, but the air feels different now. Less sacred, more political. The columns of Karnak fade behind you, and in their place rises something equally grand but with a distinctly human touch. The Temple of Luxor. If Karnak was built to honor the hidden god, Amun, Luxor was a monument to power in the open. You follow the ancient ceremonial path that once connected the two temples, yes, that same avenue of ram-headed sphinxes you strolled earlier. But this time, you're walking it in the opposite direction, drawn toward the river and the real theater of the pharaoh's divine performance. Luxor isn't about death, and it's not entirely about gods either. It's about kingship, the ritual of coronation, the divine right to rule. This temple didn't just house statues or sacred boats. It staged the very drama of becoming pharaoh. You pause at its grand first pylon, where two colossal seated statues of Ramses II still guard the entrance. One leans slightly, his hand resting on a now broken knee, the the smile on his face suspiciously smooth as if he's been watching tourists for 3,000 years and is quietly judging their hat choices. Step inside. Compared to Karnak's overwhelming sprawl, Luxor feels more intimate. But don't be fooled, it's no less grand. Every wall, every corridor, every pillar speaks of deliberate design. Ramses II added most of what you see here: the open courtyard, the pylon, and the colonnade. And if there was ever a pharaoh obsessed with PR, it was Ramses. He built monuments the way some people collect stamps, compulsively and everywhere. His statues pop up all over Egypt like ancient selfies carved in stone. The ones here? Just a warm-up. You move forward into the peristyle court, where 74 columns line the courtyard like stone soldiers. The reliefs tell a story the one Ramses liked, the Stoff victory at the Battle of Kadesh. You trace the shapes of galloping horses, of defeated Hittites sprawled beneath Egyptian chariots, of Ramses himself, larger than life, driving his enemies into chaos. Historians still argue whether this greatest chariot battle in history was actually a draw, but Ramses wasn't about nuance. His version? Total domination. Now, here's your mainstream historical detail. The Luxor temple was primarily dedicated to the rejuvenation of kingship. It was here, during the Opet festival, that the sacred statue of Amun journeyed from Karnak to Luxor each year, accompanied by priests, dancers, soldiers, and ordinary citizens. For 11 days, and later 27, because who doesn't love a longer party, the city transformed. The divine met the earthly, and the pharaoh's right to rule was ritually renewed before the people and the gods alike. And in the heart of Luxor stands something truly bizarre mosque, specifically the Mosque of Abu al-Haggag, built during the 13th century right on top of the temple's ancient ruins. And it's still active. You blink. This ancient Egyptian holy site, once filled with incense and chants to Amun, now carries the echo of Friday prayers from a different faith. It's a strange layering of time stone upon stone, God upon God, faith upon faith. That's your quirky detail. The only place in Egypt where a functioning mosque stands inside a pharaonic temple. Imagine going to a yoga class and finding out it's being held in a medieval castle. That kind of vibe. Deeper inside, the sanctuary awaits. Smaller, darker, the walls seem to close in, the carvings more delicate, more personal. You run your hand along the smooth surface of the temple's core chamber, trying to imagine it as it once was. Gold-leafed statues, painted ceilings, the flicker of oil lamps casting shadows like whispering ghosts. At one point, Alexander the Great claimed this space too. Yep, he left inscriptions, recasting himself as pharaoh, doing what conquerors have always done, stepping into someone else's myth and pretending it was always theirs. His name, still visible on the inner sanctuary, is a reminder that even the mightiest invaders wanted a little bit of that divine glow. Luxor, it seems, had enough aura to share. But Luxor wasn't just spiritual, it was also practical. The temple functioned like a royal propaganda machine. It told everyone that the pharaoh wasn't just a king, he was the son of Amun, destined to rule. That message was etched into every surface like a billboard made of limestone. You turn a corner and find a relief of the pharaoh being breastfed by a goddess. Slightly awkward, yes, but symbolically rich. This wasn't literal it, was metaphorical nourishment, divine approval. A godly Yelp review. Pharaoh, 5 stars, would reincarnate again. Outside, the sun is beginning to dip. The light casts long shadows across the colonnade. You pause and look back the way you came toward Karnak. Imagine, once a year, the statue of Amun carried this very path, followed by drums, dancers, perfume sellers, livestock, and likely one or two people just trying to sell snacks. The Opet festival was more than ritual. It was the ancient version of Mardi Gras, with a touch of celestial politics. But here's the thing, Luxor wasn't just for pharaohs or priests, it was for everyone. The reliefs show not only kings and gods, but butchers, scribes, dancers, and children. The festival was public. People could witness, participate, cheer. In this temple, Egypt's past didn't just sit in silence, it sang. Your feet begin to ache, and your legs feel the weight of the centuries. But the temple doesn't feel tired. If anything, it feels timeless. Like it's still waiting for the next procession, the next drumbeat, the next flicker of torchlight down its sacred halls. You rest for a moment at the base of a fallen obelisk, the hieroglyphs still sharp, still proud. And as night begins to fall, the stones around you absorb the color of twilight, turning golden, then violet, then almost blue. You don't say goodbye, you just nod. Because temples like Luxor don't need farewells. They're already half listening, always have been. You don't stray far from the temple grounds before the night draws you back to the banks of the Nile. The river moves slow and dark now, like liquid ink under the stars, carrying ghost stories instead of boats. You linger at the edge, where the wind smells faintly of wet reeds and sandstone dust, and then you step onto a boatar felucca, its white canvas sail catching the evening breeze like a dream. You're heading north, but only slightly. You've done Karnak, you've done Luxor. Now it's time to dive deeper beneath the surface into the mind and soul behind the marvels, the sacred principles of Egyptian architecture. You see, all this symmetry, these axis-aligned temples and precision-cut blocks, they weren't just architectural choices, they were theology rendered in stone. The Egyptians didn't build because they could, they built because they must, and they built with meaning. As you drift slowly down the Nile, you imagine the world the way an ancient Egyptian saw it, not round, not spinning through the void, but flat and orderly. The Nile runs north, so it must be sacred. The east? That's where the sun rises birth. The west? Where it sets death. This cosmic geography seeped into everything they built. Temples almost always faced east. Tombs? Always west. Because death was just the other side of the morning. Mainstream historical fact, Egyptian architecture was inherently cosmological. Every temple, every tomb was designed as a mirror of the universe. Columns weren't just supports, they were lotus stalks holding up the sky. Ceilings painted blue weren't aesthetic, they were recreating the sky goddess Nut stretching overhead. Floors weren't stone, they were the body of Geb, god of the earth. You float past tiny river islands and hear frogs croaking, just like they would have 3,000 years ago. Somewhere nearby, a heron takes flight. You imagine yourself now as one of the temple architects' chief of works, perhaps standing on the sand with a stick and string, aligning your first wall with the exact point the sun rises on the spring equinox. You don't have AutoCAD. You have astronomy, patience, and a belief that if you get this wrong, the gods will literally be annoyed with you for eternity. The felucca glides quietly as you imagine that first trench being dug. You see teams of men chanting as they drag sledges carrying colossal stone blocks, their feet sinking into hot sand. No wheels, no cranes. Just ropes, ramps, and divine motivation. A quirky tidbit for you. There's a wall relief in the tomb of Jehutihotep that shows 172 men hauling a giant statue. What's wild is not just the teamwork, it's the guy at the front pouring water onto the sand. For a long time, historians thought he was doing some kind of ritual. Turns out, adding water reduced friction, making the sand easier to drag over. That's right, ancient Egyptian civil engineers figured out how to beat dry friction before anyone had a calculator. You begin to notice something else about the temples as you float downstream in your imagination. They all tell a story, one that unfolds spatially. You don't just see an Egyptian temple, you travel through it. From the open court of the commoners, to the pillared hall of the initiated, into the shadowy sanctum where only the highest priest and the pharaoh may enter. Each doorway you pass through isn't just a door, it's a filter, a test, a narrowing. Historians still argue whether this spatial compression was meant to replicate the soul's journey through the afterlife, or whether it was a method of controlling crowds and ritual flow, maybe both. Maybe temples weren't just buildings, they were sermons you walked through. And don't forget sound. Yeah, sound. You're standing in a hyperstyle hall. It's quiet, sure, but not silent. The wind sighs between the columns. Your footsteps echo differently depending on the width of the chamber. Priests chant, and their voices rise to the ceiling and stay there, humming in a space designed to amplify reverence. That's not accident. That's acoustical engineering. 3,000 years before microphones. You think back to Karnak's great hyperstyle hall, those 134 papyrus columns, not placed randomly. Their height and spacing create a sonic corridor. You speak a single word in there, and it bounces softly back at you like a memory. Now imagine incense curling through that space, sunlight filtering through a clerestory, dust motes catching the glow like slow-motion sparks. You're not just seeing architecture anymore. You're inside a multi-sensory machine designed to induce awe, humility, and cosmic awareness. The Felucca docks. You step onto the riverbank again and walk up toward a smaller, lesser-known ruin. No grand pylons here, just tumbled stone, part buried in earth, half forgotten. But here too, the rules hold. East is life, west is death. Every stone knows its place in the cosmic map. You walk toward the exit, past the spot where a Roman fresco hides beneath Coptic Christian paint, which in turn overlays a pharaonic relief. If Karnak is a temple of time, then Luxor is a poem in palimpsest. Not overwritten, but co-written, century after century. The stars are out now, and Luxor is lit by soft floodlights that make the temple glow like a ship adrift in the night. You look back one last time. The stone glows gold. The past hums faintly underfoot. You remember that missing obelisk in Paris and smile. Even when scattered, Egypt's stories remain connected. Across continents, across centuries, they whisper the same thing. We're not finished. You're still reeling from the enormity of Karnak when your feet carry you south, through time, through dust, through the land of the living, into the domain of the divine. The sun's dipped lower now, throwing long shadows across the earth, and the Nile's breeze follows you like a watchful spirit. You pass crumbling mud-brick homes and sun-bleached sycamores until, like a revelation rising out of limestone, the Temple of Luxor unfolds before you. Not just another temple. Luxor is Karnak's elegant, siblingless, sprawling, more composed. Where Karnak shouts, Luxor whispers, but it's a whisper that curls around your bones. You enter through the first pylon, a towering gateway decorated with scenes of Ramesses II smiting enemies, because of course he is. Ramesses never met a wall he didn't want to cover with a power pose. 2 colossal seated statues flank the entrance, their faces eerily serene despite their immense size. You can still see the blackened remnants of what used to be colorful paint outlining their eyes, now long erased by time and tourists' fingers. Just past them, you notice the remnants of a single pink granite obelisk. The other one? It's in Paris. Yeah, the French took it in the 19th century as a gift, because that's how colonialism usually dresses itself. As generosity, the empty socket of the missing obelisk feels like a pulled tooth. You don't even have to be Egyptian to feel a small ache. You slip into the court of Ramesses II, a colonnaded courtyard lined with 74 papyrus-shaped columns and more statues of the man himself standing, seated, standing again. You start to get the feeling he may have had an ego the size of a pyramid. But who could blame him? In this city, image was power, and permanence was the language of kings. Mainstream historical fact: the Temple of Luxor was primarily built by Amenhotep III and Ramesses II, and unlike other temples, it wasn't solely a home for gods, it was deeply political. It served as a stage for the Opet Festival, an annual ceremony in which Amun, Mut, and Khonsu would journey from Karnak to Luxor in gilded barks, affirming the divine legitimacy of the pharaoh. Basically, it was the world's oldest PR campaign with fireworks, incense, and a lot of rowing. Here's your quirky tidbit for the night. Nestled within the Luxor temple is a functioning mosque, Abu Haggag Mosque, built during the 13th century, perched right on top of the ruins. You walk past it and feel that strange, sweet friction of continuity. Where once priests chanted to Amun, now a muezzin calls to prayer. No demolition, no replacement, just layers. Time doesn't erase here, it composts. You move on toward the inner sanctum. The deeper you go, the quieter it gets. The outer court opens into the hyper-style hall of Amenhotep III, a dim, narrow forest of columns where the roof presses lower. You feel it in your chest. The space gets tighter, the light scarcer, like you're being slowly wrapped in divine linen. You reach the birth rumor chamber with faded carvings depicting the divine birth of Amenhotep III. Gods whispering into queens' ears, spirits entering wombs, Pharaoh born not of man, but of God. You chuckle softly, imagining how that story went over at dinner with the in-laws. Still, even now, there's something intimate in the carvings. You reach out and touch the cool wall, tracing the outline of a falcon-headed deity with your fingertips. And then you see it. The sanctuary of Amun. Not grand, not flamboyant, just sacred. A dark, box-like space where once a golden statue of Amun stood, accessible only to high priests and the pharaoh himself. You breathe it in, the silence, the weight, the memory of footsteps that haven't echoed here in thousands of years. Historians still argue whether this sanctuary was reserved exclusively for ritual, or if it also served as a private space for kings to communal conspire. The lines between sacred and political were never quite clear in ancient Egypt, and perhaps that was the point. Keep the divine mysterious, and no one questions your rule. You step back into the open air just as twilight settles in. The temple is bathed in amber light now, the sandstone glowing like old fire. You pause to absorb the quiet grandeur, but then you hear something unexpected: laughter. Kids are playing nearby modern Egyptian children, running around the ruins like it's their playground. And for a moment, the timelessness of it all hits you. Empires rise, gods fall, conquerors take, tourists ogle, and yet here are children, laughing between the columns. That's the pulse that refuses to fade. Then, like a broken spell, the moment fades. You're back in the 21st century, standing in dust, camera in hand, wondering why the gift shop only sells paperweights. But Karnak isn't about souvenirs. It's about scale of belief, of ambition, of stone. This wasn't built to impress you. It was built to humble you, to remind you that pharaohs may be mortal, but their gods demanded permanence. Every beam and pillar whispers the same thing. I was here before you. I'll be here after. Before you leave, you crane your neck upward one last time inside the hyperstyle hall. Above, Faint traces of blue and red paint still cling to the ceiling. That's the part people forget. Karnak wasn't beige back then. It was blazing with color like walking through a dream. And here's one more thought as you leave. Archaeologists believe only a small portion of Karnak has been fully excavated. What lies buried beneath centuries of sand could rewrite history or at least add a twist or two. So if you stumble over a loose stone on the way out, maybe dig just a little deeper. Your day at Karnak ends the way it began, in awe. And as you walk back through the avenue of sphinxes, those weathered ram heads seem to smile again. Not smugly, just knowingly. You step off the boat and back onto the east bank of the Nile, the city of Thebes humming in the distance. But tonight, you're not headed to the markets or back to your sleeping mat. No, you're walking north now toward a forest of stone that waits like a frozen parade of giants. The moment you glimpse those towering pylons rising out of the heat haze, your pace slows instinctively. You've just arrived at Karnak, and it is absurdly huge. Karnak isn't just a temple, it's a city of Tempelesa, sprawling, layered epic of architecture, mythology, and royal ego that sprawls over 200 acres. Think of it as the ancient Egyptian version of Rome's Vatican and Times Square rolled into one. The main draw? The Temple of Amun-Ra, a structure so colossal it makes modern cathedrals feel like pop-up tents. But first, the approach. You walk the avenue of sphinxes, flanked on either side by hundreds of sandstone creatures, each one a lion's body with a ram's head, the sacred form of Amun. Their features are weathered, but you swear some are still smirking. They've been here since the reign of Nectanebo I in the 4th century BCE, standing guard, unimpressed by every footstep that dared follow yours. Past the first pylon massive and half-finished, even after centuries you're swallowed into a shadowy colossus of columns. This is the Great Hypostyle Hall, and honestly, it's not just impressive, it's absurd. You are now inside a stone forest made up of 134 gigantic papyrus-shaped columns, some 24 meters tall, arranged in rows like the legs of divine titans. Sunlight filters through gaps in the sandstone ceiling, throwing golden shafts across carved hieroglyphs. Each surface is etched with story kings smiting enemies, gods receiving offerings, festivals captured in freeze frame. It's enough to make you whisper. And you're alone. Well, almost. You're sharing space with an army of invisible tourists, past and present pilgrims, priests, soldiers, and archaeologists who once traced these same steps. You run your fingers over the cool groove of a cartouche. Maybe it's Seti I, maybe Ramesses II. Both left their mark here like a game of royal graffiti. Mainstream historical fact? Karnak was developed continuously for over 1,500 years, beginning in the Middle Kingdom and peaking in the New Kingdom. Every major pharaoh added something: new chapels, new pylons, new obelisks. It became the beating heart of state-sponsored religion. Amun wasn't just a god, he was the god, and this was his home. Your sandals crunch along the stone path toward the sacred lake. Priests used this water for ritual cleansing. You stop for a moment, peering into the dark surface, wondering how many secrets it still holds. Legends say a golden bark once floated here. A boat used to carry Amun's statue during the Opet festival, when the gods left the temple and toured the city. That wasn't just for show, that was PR. Religion and power? Always excellent bedfellows. And here's a quirky tidbit. Some Egyptologists believe Karnak's layout may have encoded cosmic alignments. The axis of the temple aligns with the winter solstice sunrise. Was it intentional or just convenient? Historians still argue whether the builders were deliberately anchoring the heavens in stone, if it just looked cool to line things up with the sun. You loop around toward the precinct of Mut, Amun's consort. The ground here feels softer, quieter, less showy than the main complex. Hundreds of statues of Sekhmeta, lion-headed goddess of war, and healing dot the temple grounds. Many are broken, but their gaze still burns. You pause at one, leaning in until your nose nearly touches hers. Her eyes seem to whisper, "You're lucky I'm asleep." You back away slowly. Beyond Mut's precinct lies the temple of Khonsu, the moon god, whose face is carved serenely into lintels and doorways. Fewer tourists wander here. The silence is welcome. You find a spot against the wall, maybe where a priest once paused for breath between chants. You close your eyes. For just a moment, the wind changes. You hear chanting. You smell incense. You feel the hush of 1,000 footsteps sweeping through the columns. It's not magic, it's memory. Still, you can't help but smile. You pass tomb after tomb, some open to visitors, others locked tight, some half collapsed, some hidden behind wooden barriers and bureaucratic mystery. KV5, the tomb of Ramesses II's sons, stretches like a subterranean city over 100 chambers, many still unexcavated. It's more complex than some hotels you've stayed in. But here's a modern twist. Archaeology isn't what it used to be. Now it's high-tech, laser scanners, thermal imaging, AI, assisted reconstruction. You can explore the tombs from your couch if you want, thanks to virtual reality. But let's be honest, nothing compares to the musty breath of ancient stone on your face, the squeak of your soles on the sanded limestone floor. At the far edge of the valley, the sun dips low. The cliffs glow orange. You sit on a shaded rock, sip the last of your warm water, and think about the people buried here, kings who ruled an empire, men, and some women, who saw themselves as gods. And yet, every one of them ended up heristacked beneath sand and silence. You chuckle softly. Even pharaohs had real estate problems. The moment lingers, and then a gust of wind kicks up dust, stinging your eyes, reminding you that time doesn't stop here. It doesn't even slow down. It just carves deeper and deeper into the rock, waiting for someone like you to notice. You rise, dust off your pants, and start the climb out of the valley. The light has changed again. The desert is cooling, and the Nile calls you back to the land of the living. You're walking west, now crossing the Nile by boat, the kind with oars that creak and splash and smell faintly of sun-warmed rope. The breeze carries that distinct mix of river, mud, and desert wind, and ahead the hills rise like sleeping giants, red gold and silent in the morning haze. You're not just changing direction, you're crossing a threshold, because once you leave the East Bank behind, you're leaving the land of the living. Welcome to the west, the realm of the dead. The Valley of the Kings isn't much to look at from a distance. It's bare, rocky, and sun-blasted. But beneath your feet, 70-plus tombs tunnel through these cliffs like a honeycomb of hidden ambition. Here, the pharaohs of the new kingdom, after years of stuffing their pyramids with loot, only to have it looted got smart. They carved their resting places into solid rock and tried to hide them. Did it work? Well, mostly not, but you can't blame them for trying. The valley was selected not just for its secrecy, but also for its symbolism. Look to your left. See that pyramid-shaped peak? Locals call it Al-Qurn. The ancient Egyptians saw in it a natural pyramid, a sacred form bestowed by the gods themselves. Building here was like letting nature handle the architecture, or at least the vibes. You duck into Tomb KV 62. Yep, this one. The big one. King Tutankhamun. Discovered in 1922 by Howard Carter, it changed everything. The boy king's tomb wasn't the grandest or the biggest, but it was the only one, more or less, untouched. Gold, alabaster, furniture, chariots all crammed in like the world's most opulent storage closet. You remember that now iconic moment when Carter, holding a flickering candle, peered inside and muttered, "Yes, wonderful things." Inside, the air is thick, still, and dry. Your steps echo against the smooth walls, the paint still vivid despite 3,000 years of silence. And there it is, the famous golden death mask. Those inlaid lapis eyes staring right through you. Tut may have been a minor king, but here, in death, he rules them all. Mainstream historical fact? The valley was used for over 500 years, from roughly 1,550 to 1077 BCE, housing 60-plus known tombs of pharaohs like Seti I and Thutmose III. Each tomb followed a general plan sloping corridors, pillared halls, burial chambers all decorated with spells from the Book of the Dead, the Amduat, or the Litany of Ra, depending on the king's tastes in the afterlife. But here's a fringe tidbit. Some archaeologists believe there are still undiscovered tombs in the valley, maybe even another royal cache like Tut's. Ground-penetrating radar scans in the last decade suggest hidden chambers near KV-62. Could there be a Queen Nefertiti tomb, or are we just chasing shadows through stone? You move on, deeper into the valley, past tomb entrances chiseled with cartouches, past warning signs that feel both archaeological and supernatural. The heat presses in. Your bottle of water is sweating more than you are. At KV-17, you stop again. This is the tomb of Seti I. Now this one? This is architectural poetry, over 100 meters long, multiple chambers. Walls, like illustrated manuscripts, come to life gods, painted in deep reds and midnight blues, stars stippled across ceilings in golden constellations. This isn't just a tomb, it's a cosmic journey. Every step Seti took in the afterlife was plotted here in pigment and stone. Historians still argue whether these tombs were ever meant to be seen again after burial, if the elaborate decoration was purely for the god's eyes. Some say priests would return to tend to the tombs. Others believe once sealed, that was it. Silence forever. Either way, you feel like an intruder, like you're eavesdropping on eternity. Up above, vultures circle lazily on thermals, oblivious to your presence. Down here, the silence is deeper than anything you've known. It's not just absence of sound, it's presence of time. A thickness that presses against your ears. Suddenly, you hear it. No, not ghosts, just a guide yelling at a tourist for touching a wall painting. You lie back gently now, your thoughts sinking into the sand, as if it were a warm bed drawn just for you. The hum of distant wind fades into the background, no longer a breeze, but a whisper of time itself. Around you, the ancient stones stand silent not as relics of a lost world, but as reminders that once, people just like you looked at the stars and dared to reach for them. Your breathing slows. The air is still, thick with peace. All those corridors of carved stone and whispered prayers behind you now feel distant, folded neatly into the long dream of history. The Nile still flows somewhere in the dark, quiet and tireless. A jackal cries once, then nothing. You smile, just barely. The lights of the temples may be gone, the fires may be out, but here, inside this story, the past stays warm, flickering quietly like a candle behind your eyes. Sleep easy now. The gods are watching. The moon hangs like a silver coin in the sky, casting its quiet light across the Nile as you make your final approach. There's no crowd now, no grandeur, just stillness. And rising out of that stillness, like a memory too large to forget, is the last of Egypt's great ancient wonders, the pyramids of Giza. You already know the image. Everyone does. Three great geometric forms rising from the desert like the gods themselves carved triangles into the earth. But now you're here. And standing in front of the Great Pyramid of Khufu, even at night, you feel impossibly small. This isn't architecture. This is ambition, petrified. You step closer. The stones are massive each, one as tall as your chest, and they stretch, row after row, layer after layer, up toward the stars, as if gravity were only a rumor. The wind catches sand at your feet, making tiny hissing sounds as grains tumble between the rocks. You press your hand to the stone. It's warm, still like it remembers the sun. Mainstream historical fact: the Great Pyramid, built around 2560 BCE, originally stood over 146 meters tall. It remained the tallest human-made structure on Earth for more than 3,800 years. No cranes, no steel. Just 2.3 million limestone blocks, each weighing 2 to 15 tons, all cut, transported, and set with such precision that even modern tools struggle to replicate the feat. You step back to look at the pyramid's angle. It's not a stack of rectangles, it's a perfect 51.5-degree slope so mathematically clean that some folks still try to pin alien credit on it. But let's be honest, it wasn't aliens. It was humans with time, belief, and a serious workforce. You turn your gaze to the smaller pyramids nearby, those of Khafre and Menkaure. Each has its own personality. Khafre's still wears part of its original casing stones at the peak, catching moonlight like a glass crown. Menkaure's is smaller but no less deliberate, its base blocks visibly larger, perhaps as a statement of strength despite its size. Then there's the Sphinx. It crouches near the pyramids, eternally frozen mid-riddle. You walk closer and stare into its eroded face. No one knows for sure who it represents. Khafre, maybe. Or perhaps it was always more than a portrait. Perhaps it was meant as a guardian or a challenge to the gods. Or maybe historians still argue whether it predates the pyramids altogether, its weathering suggesting an age far older than the Old Kingdom. That debate still stirs fights in conference rooms to this day. A quirky tidbit? During the medieval period, a Sufi zealot named Muhammad Saim al-Dar is said to have tried to destroy the Sphinx's face because it was being worshipped. He managed to hammer off the nose before locals stopped him. You don't become a myth by accident. It takes devotion and vandalism, apparently. You walk around to the pyramid side and find yourself staring up at the ascending passage. Originally sealed, it was cracked open by treasure hunters centuries ago. You duck inside. It's cramped, musty, and the air is still. You climb up the grand gallery stone walls, pressing in, the ceiling narrowing, the slope steep. It feels like crawling into the memory of a god. And then, the king's chamber. Empty, silent. And yet, you're not alone. Not really. There's something about the proportions of the room, the polished granite, the silence so complete it hums. You sit for a moment in the center, close your eyes, and wonder how something built for death could feel so utterly alive. A whisper of wind echoes down the gallery. You open your eyes. The stars await. Back outside, you walk around the base again. You imagine the workers, not slaves, mind you, despite Hollywood's insistence. Mainstream evidence now shows they were likely seasonal laborers, perhaps 20,000, at a time fed and housed in nearby workers' villages, some even buried with honor near the site. The graffiti they left behind? Not prayers jokes, the friends of Khufu, or the drunkards of Menkaure, because even immortality needs a little mischief. The moon has drifted higher now. The sands are cool under your feet. You take one last glance back at the skyline of stone. The geometry is perfect, the symbolism profound. And yet, it's the humanity you carry with you, the precision, The perseverance, the absolute certainty that what they built would last longer than any king. Historians still debate what these pyramids truly meant. Tombs, star maps, rebirth machines, maybe all of the above. Or maybe they're just the best we could do with the tools we had, trying to grasp the divine by stacking rocks a little closer to heaven. You step away. The night exhales. And the pyramids remain. You bend to pick one up. It's warm from the day's sun, rough to the touch. But when you lift it just slightly, you realize it's been shaped. It has weight. And when you place it back, the space it occupied feels different, emptier, like something sacred was momentarily disturbed. That's Egyptian architecture. Not just scale, not just grandeur, not just symmetry. It's meaning pressed into mortar. You continue up the hill, where a breeze lifts your hair, and the stars gleam like they've seen it all before, because they have. You remember how, back in Luxor, you noticed that centuries of different faiths had layered themselves into the stone. Here too, in the geometry of architecture, you realize nothing was accidental. Everything was imbued with intent. Even now, as you lie down on a warm rock under the night sky, you feel it in your bones. Egyptian temples weren't built for eternity. They were built out of eternity.